My name is Phyllis, and I'm 67 years old. I spent 40 years as a nurse in Boston, retiring only to find myself living in an apartment with walls that crumble a little more each day. My daughter Amanda has a successful career in real estate with her wealthy husband Gregory. I always thought we were close until I discovered something that shattered my heart. Amanda had bought her mother-in-law Judith a luxurious house while I was dealing with leaking pipes and mold. Before I tell you how I finally stood up for myself after years of being overlooked, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt taken for granted by family. I raised Amanda by myself after her father left us when she was only 3 years old. He simply packed his bags one day, said this wasn't the life he wanted, and disappeared. Just like that, I became both mother and father to a confused toddler who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. It wasn't easy, but I made it work. As a nurse, I was fortunate to have a stable job, but it certainly didn't make us rich. I worked double shifts at Boston Memorial Hospital, often coming home with aching feet and a sore back, but seeing Amanda's smile made it all worthwhile. There were countless nights when I'd tuck her in, then return to the kitchen table to study for my advanced nursing certification. Those extra credentials meant higher pay, and every extra dollar went toward giving Amanda a better life. "Why don't you ever play with me like the other mummies?" Amanda asked once when she was about 7. Those words stung, but I explained that working hard now meant we would have better days ahead. I promised her that one day things would be easier for both of us. I truly believed that. When Amanda got accepted to Northeastern University, I couldn't have been prouder. She was the first in our family to attend college. The tuition was steep, and despite the partial scholarship she received, we still had a significant amount to cover. I took on weekend shifts and sold my mother's antique dining set that had been in our family for generations. That beautiful cherry wood table had been the center of countless family gatherings, but Amanda's education was more important than any possession. "Mum, are you sure about selling Grandma's table?" Amanda had asked, concern in her eyes. "Absolutely," I assured her. "Your grandma would have wanted her granddaughter to get the best education possible. It's just furniture, sweetheart." I even postponed my retirement by 5 years to help with her graduate school tuition. My body protested with every extra year, my back pain becoming chronic, but watching Amanda walk across that stage with her master's degree made it all seem worthwhile. It was during her final year at university that Amanda met Gregory. She brought him home for dinner, and I could immediately see why she was attracted to him. Gregory was tall, handsome, and carried himself with the confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. He was studying business management and already had connections through his family that most people work decades to establish. "Mrs. Parker, thank you for welcoming me into your home," he said, handing me an expensive bottle of wine that I knew cost more than I typically spent on groceries for a week. "Amanda speaks so highly of you." I noticed how Amanda looked at him with such adoration, and I was happy for her. But there was something about Gregory that made me slightly uneasy. Perhaps it was the way he casually mentioned his family's vacation home in the Hamptons, or how he seemed surprised by the modest size of our apartment. Still, I reminded myself that it wasn't fair to judge him for being born into privilege. 2 months later, Amanda called me, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, Gregory proposed we're getting married." The engagement happened quickly, and soon I was introduced to Gregory's mother, Judith. Our first meeting was at an upscale restaurant in downtown Boston that made me feel immediately out of place. Judith arrived in designer clothes, her fingers adorned with diamonds, her perfectly highlighted hair not moving an inch when she turned her head. "So you're a nurse," Judith said, after the introductions, somehow making my career of saving lives sound like I collected garbage for a living. How quaint. I always admire people who can work in such challenging conditions. Throughout that dinner, Judith made several comments about single mothers and how remarkable it was that Amanda turned out so well, despite the circumstances. Each word felt like a small paper cut, painful, but not enough to make a scene about. I smiled and changed the subject, not wanting to create tension for Amanda's sake. The wedding planning began, and I quickly realized that my role would be minimal. Judith took control, dismissing my suggestions with comments like, "Oh, I'm sure that would be fine for a smaller wedding, but we're expecting over 300 guests." When I offered to make Amanda's favorite strawberry cake for the bridal shower, Judith laughed. "We've already hired the pastry chef from the Four Seasons, but perhaps you could bring some of those homemade cookies you mentioned." On the day of the wedding, I was seated at a table far from the main party, while Judith was prominently placed beside the newlyweds. When it came time for speeches, the microphone went to Gregory's father, then to Judith, and then to Gregory's best man. No one thought to ask me if I wanted to say a few words about the daughter I had raised alone. After the wedding, I began to notice changes in Amanda. Our weekly phone calls became monthly, then sporadic. When we did speak, she often mentioned the parties she attended with Gregory, the important people they met, the exotic vacations they took. She started to make small comments about my apartment, my clothes, even my hairstyle. "Mum, you should really update your wardrobe. Those slacks are so 90s, she said during one of her rare visits. "They're comfortable and still in good condition." I replied, not mentioning that new clothes weren't in my budget after helping her with school loans. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You should treat yourself sometimes. Life isn't just about practicality." This from the daughter who had watched me stretch every dollar, who had once understood the difference between wants and needs. Somehow, in the 3 years since meeting Gregory, she had forgotten all those lessons. I made excuses for her behavior. She was busy with her new life. She was adjusting to marriage and a different social circle. She would remember our values eventually. But deep down, I knew something fundamental had changed in our relationship. The little girl who once looked at me like I hung the moon now seemed embarrassed by her ordinary mother. The apartment I moved into after retirement wasn't much, but it was what I could afford on my pension. Located in an older building in Dorchester, it had a small kitchen, 1 bedroom, and a living area just big enough for a couch and television. When I first toured it, I noticed a small water stain on the bathroom ceiling, but didn't think much of it. The landlord assured me it was from an old leak that had been fixed. "Don't worry about that, Mrs. Parker. We've taken care of the problem. This building has great bones," Mr. Levitt said, patting the wall with affection. "They don't make them like this anymore." The rent was within my budget. The location was close to public transportation, and there was a small park nearby where I could walk. It seemed like a reasonable place to begin my retirement years. The first winter revealed the truth. During a heavy rainstorm, I woke to the sound of dripping water. The small stain in the bathroom had grown, and water was steadily dripping into the bathtub. I called Mr. Levitt, who promised to send someone right away. 3 days later, a maintenance man applied some spackle to the ceiling and declared it fixed. It wasn't. Within a month, the leak returned, and this time it was accompanied by a new one in the kitchen. Again, promises were made, temporary fixes were applied, and the cycle continued. By the 2nd year, I had become accustomed to placing buckets around my apartment during rainstorms. The heating system was equally problematic. On particularly cold days, the ancient radiators would clank and groan, but produce minimal heat. I would layer clothing and wrap myself in blankets, calling the landlord only to be told that the boiler was working, as well as could be expected for an older system. "We're looking into upgrades, Mrs. Parker," became Mr. Levitt's standard response. "These things take time." By the 3rd year, the condition of the apartment had deteriorated significantly. The persistent moisture had caused portions of the walls to crumble. The paint bubbled and peeled, revealing layers of older paint beneath. The wooden window frames had warped, making them difficult to open in summer and impossible to seal properly in winter. The worst development was the mold. It began as small black spots in the corner of the bathroom, but soon spread along the walls and ceiling. I tried cleaning it with bleach, but it always returned more aggressive than before. My health began to suffer. I developed a persistent cough that I initially attributed to seasonal allergies, but when it continued for months, accompanied by headaches and fatigue, I finally visited my doctor. "How long have you been exposed to mold, Phyllis?" Dr. Reeves asked after examining me. "Is that what this is about? I've been trying to clean it, but it keeps coming back. Mold exposure can cause significant respiratory issues, especially at your age. You need to address the source of the problem or consider moving. Easier said than done on a fixed income. I left with a prescription for an inhaler and the knowledge that my home was making me sick. The situation reached a crisis point one evening during a severe thunderstorm. I was in the kitchen preparing tea when I heard a loud crack. Looking up, I watched in horror as a section of the ceiling gave way, releasing a torrent of dirty water. I tried to move out of the way, but slipped on the wet floor, landing hard on my hip. The pain was immediate and intense. I lay there soaked and hurting water continuing to pour down around me. It took all my strength to reach the phone on the counter and call for help. The emergency room doctor confirmed that I hadn't broken anything, but had a severe bruise that would take weeks to heal properly. I was given pain medication and told to rest, which seemed like a cruel joke considering the state of my apartment. It was then, lying in my hospital bed, that I finally called Amanda. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 months, but surely she would want to know that her mother was injured. Surely she would help. "Mum, is everything okay? It's pretty late," Amanda answered, sounding more annoyed than concerned. "I'm in the hospital." I began explaining about the ceiling collapse and my fall. "Oh my God, are you okay? Wait, is this because of those leaks you mentioned? I thought the landlord fixed those." "He never really fixed anything, just patched things temporarily. The whole place is falling apart, Amanda. I don't know what I'm going to do. The doctor says I shouldn't be living with all that mold, and now part of the ceiling is gone." There was a pause before she responded. "Well, maybe this is a sign you should move. You've been complaining about that place for ages." "Move, Amanda. You know I can't afford anything else in this area. My pension barely covers my current rent and medications." "I don't know what to tell you, Mum. Gregory and I are swamped right now with his new position. We're barely home ourselves with all the business dinners and events." She paused, and I heard Gregory's voice in the background. "Look, I need to go. We have people over. Call me tomorrow, okay? Feel better." And just like that, I was alone again. I was discharged the next day and returned to my damaged apartment. Mr. Levitt had placed a tarp over the hole in the kitchen ceiling, but water still found its way through, dripping steadily into the buckets I arranged below. Despite the pain in my hip, I took on a part-time job at a local pharmacy, working 15 hours a week at the register. The extra income helped pay for the medical bills and allowed me to buy a dehumidifier, which made a small difference in the moisture level of the apartment. I also attempted some repairs myself, watching tutorials online and purchasing supplies from the hardware store. My efforts were amateurish at best and sometimes made things worse. When I tried to seal cracks around the windows with caulk, I accidentally sealed one window shut completely. My attempt to fix a leaking pipe under the kitchen sink resulted in a minor flood that soaked the already damaged floor. I applied for senior housing through various programs, but was told the waiting lists were years long. "You're not considered high priority because you currently have housing," the social worker explained apologetically. "Even inadequate housing puts you lower on the list than those who are homeless." Desperate, I borrowed money from my friend Susan to pay for a professional to address the worst of the mold. The contractor looked around my apartment and shook his head. "Mom, this is beyond a spot treatment. The entire place needs to be gutted and rebuilt. The moisture has gotten into the walls, the ceiling, everywhere." "I just need it to be safe enough to live in," I insisted. "I don't have anywhere else to go." He did what he could, removing the visible mold and applying a specialized paint designed to prevent regrowth. But he warned me it was a temporary solution at best. The underlying issues need to be addressed or it'll just come back. I thanked him and paid the bill, which took the last of my savings. That night I sat in my partially repaired apartment and wondered how my life had come to this. I had worked hard for decades, cared for others, raised a daughter I was proud of. I never expected luxury, but I hadn't expected to spend my retirement years afraid that my ceiling might collapse on me in my sleep. It was a Tuesday morning when Susan called. Her voice had that hesitant quality people get when they're about to deliver bad news but aren't sure how. Phyllis, how are you feeling? How's your hip? She asked, the concern in her voice genuine. Getting better. I can move without the cane now, at least around the apartment, I replied. Is everything okay? You sound strange. There was a pause, followed by a deep sigh. I'm not sure if I should be the one telling you this, but I thought you should know. It's about Amanda. My heart immediately raced. Is she all right? Did something happen? No, nothing like that. She's fine. It's just… Phyllis, did you know that Amanda and Gregory bought a house for his mother? The words didn't make sense at first. What do you mean they bought a house? I ran into Judith at the mall yesterday. She was going on and on about how Amanda and Gregory had purchased her a beautiful new home in Brookline as a surprise. She couldn't stop talking about how thoughtful and generous they are. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to process this information. There must be some mistake. Amanda would have mentioned something like that to me. I'm sorry, Phyllis. I know this must be shocking, especially considering… Susan trailed off, not needing to state the obvious contrast between Judith's new home and my crumbling apartment. Are you sure about this? Maybe they're just helping with the down payment or something. I suggested, searching for any explanation that would make this revelation less painful. No, Phyllis. Judith was very clear. She said, and I quote, Amanda and Gregory bought me a house outright, not a penny of mortgage. Can you believe how blessed I am to have such a wonderful daughter-in-law? After hanging up, I sat motionless on my couch, the news slowly sinking in. My daughter, who knew about my living conditions, who had seen the mold and the leaks, who knew about my injury from the ceiling collapse, had purchased a house for her mother-in-law, while I continued to live in unsafe conditions. I turned on my laptop, something I rarely did, except to video chat with old colleagues or check my email. With shaking hands, I navigated to Facebook, where Amanda regularly posted updates about her life with Gregory. I rarely looked at social media, since it often left me feeling more disconnected from my daughter, rather than closer to her. There it was, posted 3 weeks ago, photos of a stunning colonial-style house with perfect landscaping. Amanda and Gregory stood proudly on the front steps, with Judith between them, all three beaming with champagne flutes in hand. The caption read, "So happy to give the most amazing mother-in-law her dream home. You deserve every bit of it. Judith." I scrolled through the comments, each one praising Amanda and Gregory's generosity. Then I saw one from my former neighbor, Martha. "This is so wonderful. Is your mom getting a new place too?" Amanda had replied simply, "My mom is set with her apartment in Dorchester. She likes to keep things simple." Likes to keep things simple. As if my leaking ceiling and mouldy walls were a lifestyle choice rather than financial necessity. I continued looking through Amanda's recent posts and discovered an entire album dedicated to Judith's housewarming. Dozens of photos showcased the spacious living room with its fireplace, the gourmet kitchen with marble countertops, the luxurious master bathroom with a soaking tub. In several pictures, Amanda and Judith embraced like mother and daughter, laughing and posing together. What struck me most wasn't just the opulence of the house, but the fact that I hadn't been invited to this celebration. I hadn't even been told it was happening. My own daughter had deliberately kept me in the dark about a major life event. One comment under a photo of the backyard patio caught my eye. Someone named Barbara had written, "Such a gorgeous home, I'm surprised Phyllis wasn't at the housewarming. Is she okay?" Amanda's reply was brief. "Mom wasn't feeling well that weekend." A lie. A simple, unnecessary lie. I had been feeling perfectly fine that weekend, whatever weekend it had been. Amanda hadn't called or invited me to anything. She had chosen to exclude me and then fabricated an excuse for my absence. With a quick search, I found a real estate listing for the house. It had recently sold for $950,000, nearly $1 million for Judith's dream home, while I placed buckets under leaks and fought to breathe through mold-induced respiratory issues. I closed the laptop and reached for my phone. My hands were trembling so badly I had to dial Amanda's number twice before getting it right. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice cautious. Mum, is everything okay? You bought Judith a house. I said the words coming out flat and emotionless despite the storm raging inside me. There was a pause. Who told you that? Does it matter? Is it true? Amanda sighed. Yes, we bought Judith a house in Brookline. It was supposed to be a surprise for her 60th birthday. We've been planning it for months. I see. And were you planning to tell me at all? Of course I was, Mum. I knew you might feel. She seemed to be searching for words. Feel what, Amanda? Feel hurt that my daughter bought her mother-in-law $1 million home while I live in an apartment with a hole in the ceiling. Feel confused about why you never mentioned this during any of our conversations, even when I told you about my fall. Mum, you're making this about you and it's not. This was about doing something nice for Judith. Gregory and I are in a position to help her. And we did. And you're not in a position to help me. Your own mother who sacrificed everything for you. That's not fair. Amanda's voice hardened. This was partly Gregory's decision too. It's his money as well. So your husband wouldn't approve of helping your mother? Is that what you're saying? No. I'm saying that Judith needed a house more than you do. Her place was too big for her to manage alone after Gregory's father died. She needed something smaller but still nice. And my place with the mold that's making me sick, and the leaks that caused my injury, I don't need help with that. Mom, you're exaggerating. Every old building has some issues. You've always been one to make mountains out of molehills. Her dismissal of my very real problems felt like a slap across the face. You think I'm exaggerating? You think I made up the ceiling collapse and my trip to the emergency room? You think I enjoy living with buckets catching water throughout my apartment? Look, if things are really that bad, we can discuss helping you find a better place. But right now, we've extended ourselves financially with Judith's house and some investments. Maybe in a few months. A few months. I repeated the words bitter on my tongue. Do you remember when you were in college and your laptop broke right before finals? Do you remember how I took an extra shift that same day to get you a new one immediately, not in a few months? That was different. I needed that for school. And I need a safe place to live. But apparently that's not as important as giving Judith her dream home. Mom, you're being selfish right now. I'm sorry if you're jealous of what we did for Judith, but that's your issue to work through, not mine. Jealous. She thought I was jealous, as if this were about envy rather than feeling betrayed and forgotten by my own child. I have to go, I said, suddenly exhausted by the conversation. I hope Judith enjoys her new home. Mom, don't be like this. Can we talk about this when you're calmer? But I had already hung up. I spent that night looking through old photo albums, pictures of Amanda as a baby in the small apartment we lived in after her father left. Photos of her first day of school, me kneeling beside her with dark circles under my eyes from working the night shift. Images of her high school graduation, both of us beaming with pride. I found a Mother's Day card she had made me when she was 10. Inside, in careful handwriting, she had written, "Someday I'll take care of you like you took care of me. I promise. Love, Amanda." That promise had clearly been forgotten, replaced by new priorities and values I didn't recognize. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I wondered when exactly I had lost my daughter, and if there was any way to find her again. The breaking point came 3 weeks after discovering Amanda's secret. I was awakened at 4 a.m. by a strange gurgling sound. Groggy and confused, I switched on my bedside lamp to find water seeping under my bedroom door. I scrambled out of bed, my arthritic knees protesting, and opened the door to a nightmare. Water was everywhere, an inch deep and rising. It bubbled up from the bathroom, streamed down the walls, and poured through the kitchen ceiling in multiple places. The living room carpet squished beneath my feet. As I waded through to reach the phone, Mr. Levitt answered on the 5th ring, his voice thick with sleep. When I explained the situation, he groaned. The main water pipe must have burst. I'll call emergency services, but it might take a while. Try to get your important stuff off the floor. I spent the next hour desperately moving what I could to higher ground. Photo albums, important documents, the few pieces of jewelry I owned. But there was only so much I could save. My couch was soaked, my bookshelf beginning to warp, and my collection of nursing journals completely ruined. By sunrise, the water was 3 inches deep throughout the apartment. Emergency services had arrived to shut off the building's water supply, but the damage was already extensive. Mr. Levitt stood in my doorway, surveying the disaster with a grim expression. "This is bad, Mrs. Parker. Really bad. The whole building's affected, but your unit got the worst of it since you're directly below where the pipe burst." He shook his head. "Insurance will cover the repairs, but it's going to take weeks, maybe months. The building's not habitable right now." Weeks, months. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "Insurance should cover temporary housing. I'll have the details later today. For now, pack whatever you can salvage and find somewhere to stay for a few days. A friend's place, maybe." I called Susan, but she was in Florida visiting her daughter. My other close friend, Margaret, lived in a senior community that didn't allow long-term guests. With nowhere else to turn, I finally called Amanda. "Mum, it's 6 a.m. What's going on?" Her voice was groggy with sleep. I explained the situation, trying to keep my voice steady despite my growing desperation. "That's terrible," she said, sounding genuinely concerned for the first time in months. "What can I do?" "I need a place to stay just for a few days until the insurance arranges something." There was a pause, then muffled voices, as Amanda presumably discussed the situation with Gregory. When she returned to the phone, her tone had changed slightly. "We'd love to help, Mum, but we're actually flying to Chicago this morning for one of Gregory's business conferences. We'll be gone for 5 days." "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "I understand. But I can send you some money for a hotel until we get back. Then maybe we can figure something out." "That would help, thank you," I replied, swallowing my pride. 2 hours later, Amanda transferred $500 to my account. It was enough for a few nights at a budget motel on the outskirts of the city. I packed what little I had salvaged into my old suitcase and took a taxi to the Restway Inn. The motel was clean but Spartan. A bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a television and a bathroom. It would have to do. I unpacked my meager belongings and sat on the edge of the bed, trying not to cry. At 67, I was essentially homeless with most of my possessions destroyed or damaged. The insurance company called that afternoon. The adjuster was sympathetic but clear the building was uninhabitable and would require extensive repairs. They would cover a month of temporary housing at a similar rate to my current rent, but I would need to find a place myself and submit the receipts for reimbursement. "What happens after a month if the building isn't ready?" I asked. "We assess the situation at that time," the adjuster replied vaguely. "But I should warn you, with the extent of the damage, it could be 3 to 4 months before you can return." 3 to 4 months. The gravity of my situation began to sink in. I would need to find an affordable short-term rental in one of the most expensive housing markets in the country. On my limited pension, even with the insurance assistance, it seemed impossible. 5 days passed, and Amanda called upon returning from Chicago. "Mum, we've been thinking about your situation. How would you feel about staying with Judith for a while?" "With Judith?" I repeated, certain I had misheard. "Yes, in her new house. She has a guest room that's just sitting empty. Gregory and I discussed it, and she's agreed to let you stay there until your apartment is fixed." The idea of living as a charity case in Judith's home, the very home my daughter had purchased while ignoring my deteriorating living conditions, made my stomach turn. But what choice did I have? "That's generous of her," I managed to say. "But wouldn't I be intruding?" "Not at all. She's actually looking forward to the company. And this way you'll be comfortable in a nice house instead of stuck in some random rental or motel." I could hear the satisfaction in Amanda's voice, as if this solution resolved everything neatly. She and Gregory would get credit for helping both mothers, and Judith would have the opportunity to showcase her generosity by taking in her daughter-in-law's poor mother. "I'd need to think about it," I said cautiously. "When would this start?" "Well, we were thinking this weekend. Judith's having some friends over for brunch on Sunday, and she thought it would be nice to introduce you then. Introduce me? Like I was a new pet she had acquired. I'll let you know, I said, unable to commit to what felt like a humiliating arrangement. After hanging up, I sat in my motel room staring at the wall. The thought of being paraded in front of Judith's friends as her charitable project was almost unbearable. But what alternatives did I have? The next morning I was gathering my few belongings to take to the motel's laundry room when there was a knock at the door. It was Maria, the housekeeper I had chatted with briefly each day. "Good morning, Mrs. Parker. I brought you some fresh towels," she said with a warm smile. "Thank you, Maria. That's very kind." She hesitated, then said, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you still looking for a place to stay? I couldn't help overhearing your phone conversation yesterday." I nodded, embarrassed that my personal situation had been so easily overheard through the thin walls. My sister works as a residential manager at Sunset Gardens, a retirement community in Quincy. She mentioned they're looking for an assistant manager. The position comes with an apartment on the property. It's small but nice and the pay is decent. I thought maybe... "Oh, I don't know if I'm qualified for something like that," I said, though a spark of interest flickered within me. "You were a nurse, right? That's perfect. They need someone with healthcare experience who can help coordinate with residents' medical needs. My sister says the current manager is overwhelmed trying to do everything herself." Maria wrote down her sister's name and number. "Her name is Elena. Tell her Maria from Restway sent you. No pressure, but it might be worth a call." After she left, I looked at the piece of paper in my hand. It seemed like such a long shot. I hadn't worked in years, and my experience was in direct patient care, not management. Still, what did I have to lose? I placed the call expecting to leave a message, but Elena answered immediately. We spoke for nearly an hour. She explained the position in detail, and to my surprise, my nursing background was exactly what they were looking for. "The residents all have their own medical providers, but we need someone who understands healthcare systems, who can speak the language of doctors and hospitals," Eleanor explained. "Someone who can notice when a resident might need medical attention before it becomes an emergency." By the end of the call, Eleanor had invited me for an interview the following day. I hung up feeling something I hadn't experienced in months' hope. That evening, Amanda called again. "Have you thought about Judith's offer? She's expecting an answer so she can prepare the guest room." I took a deep breath. "Actually, Amanda, I may have found another option. I have an interview tomorrow for a position that includes housing." "A job, Mum, you're retired. You don't need to work at your age, especially not for housing. Why would you do that when we're offering you a perfectly good place to stay for free?" "It's not about the money," I tried to explain. "It's about independence, about having my own space where I don't feel like a burden." "You wouldn't be a burden to Judith. She's happy to help." "I'm sure she is, but I need to explore this opportunity first." Amanda sighed dramatically. "This is about the house, isn't it? You're still upset that we bought Judith a house." "This isn't about the house, Amanda. It's about me finding my own solution to my problem." "Fine. Do what you want. But don't come crying to us if this job doesn't work out. Judith's offer has an expiration date." After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. The conversation had made one thing crystal clear. Amanda didn't understand, or perhaps didn't want to understand, why living with Judith would be difficult for me. She couldn't see how it would feel to be dependent on the woman who had replaced me in my daughter's affections, who now lived in the luxury my daughter had provided while I faced homelessness. In that moment of clarity, sitting in a sparse motel room with my life's possessions reduced to a single suitcase, I made a decision. Whether or not I got the job at Sunset Gardens, I would not be moving in with Judith. I would find my own path forward, even if it meant facing uncertainty alone. It was time to stop expecting Amanda to suddenly remember the values I had tried to teach her. It was time to stop making excuses for her behavior. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of anger replace my hurt. And strangely, that anger felt empowering. It was as if a fog had lifted, allowing me to see my situation with new clarity. I was not helpless. I was not dependent on my daughter's charity or approval. I was Phyllis Parker, a woman who had raised a child alone, who had worked hard her entire life, who had overcome countless challenges. I could overcome this one too. The next morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my motel room, preparing for my interview at Sunset Gardens. My reflection showed a woman I hardly recognized. The past few months had taken their toll. My face looked drawn with dark circles under my eyes, and my silver hair, usually neatly styled, hung limply around my face. "You can do this," I told my reflection, straightening my shoulders. It had been over 15 years since my last job interview, when I'd applied for the head nurse position at Boston Memorial. So much had changed since then, including me. I opened my suitcase to find something suitable to wear. Most of my clothes had been damaged in the flood, but I had managed to salvage one navy blue blazer and a pair of black pants. They weren't stylish by any means, but they were clean and professional looking. The blazer hung a bit loosely, evidence of the weight I'd lost during my recent health issues. Looking at my meager options, I suddenly doubted myself. Who was I kidding? They wouldn't hire a woman in her late 60s for a management position. They'd want someone younger, more energetic, more current. I picked up my phone to cancel the interview, but hesitated. What was the alternative? Moving in with Judith, being paraded around as the poor mother-in-law who needed charity gnome. I would at least try. I called Susan, who was still in Florida. "I need a pep talk," I admitted when she answered. "I have a job interview today and I'm terrified." "A job interview, Phyllis, that's wonderful. Tell me about it." After I explained the situation, Susan's enthusiasm bolstered my confidence. "You were the best nurse at that hospital for decades, Phyllis. You managed entire departments. You can absolutely handle a residential manager position." "But my clothes are all ruined and I look like I haven't slept in weeks," I confessed. "Honey, you know what? Call the motel front desk and ask if there's a department store nearby. Go buy yourself one new blouse, something bright that makes you feel good. Consider it an investment in your future." I followed her advice and found a small boutique just a block from the motel. I couldn't afford much, but I purchased a simple turquoise blouse that the saleswoman assured me brought out the blue in my eyes. When I put it on with my navy blazer, I had to admit it made a difference. I looked more alive, more present. The taxi dropped me off at Sunset Gardens at exactly 1 o'clock. The facility was not what I had expected. Rather than the institutional setting I had imagined, it was a charming campus, with several low buildings surrounding a central garden area. Residents in their 70s and 80s strolled along paved walkways or sat chatting on benches amid blooming flowers. Elena met me in the main office, her warm smile immediately putting me at ease. She looked much like her sister Maria, with the same kind eyes and welcoming manner. "Mrs. Parker, it's so nice to meet you in person. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please call me Phyllis, and thank you for the opportunity." The interview was more conversational than formal. Elena asked about my nursing background, my experience with elderly patients, and my approach to healthcare coordination. I spoke about my years in geriatric care, my patience with medical bureaucracy, and my belief in treating seniors with dignity and respect. "One of our biggest challenges is balancing independence with safety," Elena explained. "Many residents resist help because they fear losing their autonomy. How would you approach that?" I thought about my own recent struggles. "I'd focus on empowering them through choices," I replied. "Often it's not about whether they need assistance, but about how that assistance is offered. No one wants to feel like a burden or a child. I'd present options rather than directives, involve them in decision-making, and above all, listen to their concerns." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the philosophy we try to maintain here. Now, would you like to see the apartment that comes with the position?" She led me to a small building near the back of the property. The apartment was on the ground floor with a private entrance and a small patio overlooking a quiet corner of the gardens. Inside, it was modest but clean and well-maintained. A combined living and dining area, a compact kitchen, a bedroom and a bathroom. It was approximately the same size as my flooded apartment, but in infinitely better condition. "It's not luxury accommodation," Eleanor said, "but it's comfortable and safe. All utilities are included, and you'd have access to all the community facilities, including the dining hall, if you ever don't feel like cooking. I walked slowly through the space, trying not to show how perfect it seemed to me. Clean walls with no mold, windows that opened properly, pipes that presumably didn't leak, and best of all, no memories of disappointment or betrayal. "It's lovely," I said simply. Back in her office, Elena surprised me by offering me the position on the spot. "Your experience is exactly what we need, and your approach aligns perfectly with our values. The salary is $38,000 annually, plus the apartment and benefits. Would that work for you?" The figure was modest, but combined with my pension, it would be more than enough, and having secure housing would eliminate my biggest worry. "Yes, that would be more than adequate. When would you want me to start? How soon can you move in? The apartment is ready now, and we're quite desperate for help." I thought about my situation at the motel, the dwindling insurance money, and Amanda's deadline for accepting Judith's offer. "I could start immediately. I don't have much to move." "Perfect. Why don't we say Monday? That gives you the weekend to get settled." As I signed the employment papers, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time since discovering Amanda's betrayal, I felt like I had control over my life again. I wasn't at the mercy of my daughter's charity or my landlord's neglect. I had made my own solution. I returned to the motel and immediately called the insurance company to inform them of my new housing situation. They agreed to cover the moving costs for my salvageable belongings currently in storage, and to send the remaining temporary housing allowance directly to me, which would help with furnishing my new apartment. Next, I called Amanda. It was time to decline Judith's generous offer. "Mum, I was just about to call you," Amanda answered. "Did you get the job?" "I did. I start on Monday." There was a pause. "Oh, so you're really going through with this, working at your age instead of accepting help from family? This is the right decision for me, Amanda. Please thank Judith for her offer, but I won't be needing it." "I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this. It's like you want to punish us for buying Judith a house." I sighed. "This isn't about punishment, Amanda. It's about me finding my own path forward. I've always taught you to be independent to solve your own problems. That's all I'm doing." "Fine," she said, her voice cold. "I hope this job is everything you think it will be." The conversation ended shortly after, and I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sad that Amanda still couldn't understand my perspective, but relieved that I wouldn't have to face the humiliation of living as Judith's charity case. The next day, I went to the storage facility where my salvaged belongings were being held. It was a sobering experience seeing my life reduced to a few boxes and pieces of furniture, most showing water damage. I sorted through everything, deciding what to keep and what to discard. My beloved reading chair, a birthday gift from Amanda years ago, was beyond saving the upholstery stained and musty. The small dining table where we had shared countless meals had warped beyond repair. My mattress and box spring were ruined, as were most of my books. But there were treasures that had survived. The photo albums I had managed to rescue before the worst of the flooding. My mother's china teapot. The quilt my grandmother had made, which had been stored in a plastic bin on a high shelf. Amanda's baby book, water-stained around the edges, but largely intact. I held the baby book in my hands, running my fingers over the cover. Inside were locks of hair from her first haircut handprints, pressed in paint photographs of milestone moments. I had documented everything, pouring my love into these pages. For a moment, I considered leaving it behind. Why keep mementos of a relationship that had changed so fundamentally? But in the end, I couldn't abandon this record of the child Amanda had been the mother I had tried to be. I placed it carefully in the keep pile. By Sunday afternoon, I had moved my few possessions into the apartment at Sunset Gardens. The insurance money had allowed me to purchase a new mattress, a simple couch, and a small dining table. The place was sparsely furnished but functional. As I was arranging my kitchen items, there was a knock at the door. To my shock, Amanda stood on my small patio, looking uncertain. "How did you find me?" I asked, stepping back to let her in. Elena is Maria's sister, and Maria works at the motel where you were staying. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. She looked around the apartment. This is where you'll be living. Yes, it's small but it's clean and safe. And it's mine. Amanda walked slowly through the space, taking in the bare walls, the minimal furniture. You don't have much left, do you? Most of my things were destroyed in the flood, I replied. But I'm starting fresh. She stopped at the small bookshelf where I had placed the surviving photo albums and Amanda's baby book. She picked up the baby book, opening it to a random page. You kept this? Of course I did. Amanda closed the book and turned to face me. Her expression was difficult to read, a mixture of discomfort and something else, perhaps regret. I came to give you this, she said, handing me an envelope. It's a check to help you furnish your new place. I looked at the envelope but didn't take it. I appreciate the thought, Amanda, but I don't need financial help. What I needed was your understanding, your support when I was living in unsafe conditions. What I needed was to feel like I mattered as much to you as Judith does. That's not fair, she said, but her protest lacked conviction. It's more complicated than that. Is it, you bought Judith a house, Amanda? A house, while knowing that I was living with leaks and mold? How would you have felt if I had bought a luxury car for a friend while you were struggling to afford basic transportation? It's not the same, she insisted, but I could see doubt creeping into her expression. It is exactly the same. It's about priorities. It's about who matters and who doesn't. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. You do matter to me, Mum. I got caught up in Gregory's world in trying to impress his family. I lost sight of what's important. I wanted to soften, to comfort her as I always had, but something held me back. Words are easy, Amanda. Actions are what count. You've shown me through your actions where I stand in your life. She looked stricken. So that's it. You're just cutting me out of your life. No, I'm establishing boundaries. I'm showing you that I value myself even if you don't. I won't be treated as an afterthought or a burden. I won't be pitied or patronized. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be based on mutual respect. Amanda stood silently for a long moment, the envelope still in her hand. Finally, she placed it on the counter. The money is yours if you want it. No strings attached. She moved toward the door, then paused. I do love you, Mum. I know it doesn't seem like it lately, but I do. After she left, I sat on my new couch, emotionally drained, but somehow lighter. I had spoken my truth without anger or bitterness, just honest assessment. The envelope remained on the counter, untouched. The next morning, my first day at my new job, I left it there. Some things couldn't be fixed with money. If Amanda truly wanted to rebuild our relationship, it would take more than a check. It would take time, consistent effort, and genuine understanding. As I walked across the gardens to the main office, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. This new chapter might not be what I had envisioned for my retirement, but it was my choice, my path forward. For the first time in too long, I felt like Phyllis Parker again, not just Amanda's forgotten mother. My first weeks at Sunset Gardens were both challenging and rewarding. After a brief orientation with Elena, I was thrown into the daily operations of managing a community of 85 seniors, each with unique needs and personalities. My responsibilities included coordinating with healthcare providers, organizing transportation to medical appointments, planning social activities, and serving as the first point of contact for any concerns or emergencies. It was demanding work, especially for someone who had been retired for several years, but my nursing background provided a solid foundation. The residents, initially cautious around the new person, gradually warmed to me. Many appreciated having someone with medical knowledge to help navigate their healthcare issues. Mrs. Abernathy, a spry 82-year-old, stopped by my office on my third day to thank me for clarifying her medication schedule. The pharmacy kept sending conflicting instructions, she explained. You're the first person who's made sense of it all. It's nice having a nurse around who speaks plain English instead of doctor jargon. Mr. Hoffman, a retired history professor with Parkinson's disease, became a regular visitor. He would bring me coffee in the mornings and chat about current events or history. "My daughter means well," he confided one day, "but she treats me like I'm made of glass. It's refreshing to talk to someone who doesn't look at me with pity." I understood exactly what he meant. There was dignity in being treated as a capable adult, regardless of age or circumstance. It was something I had craved in my own relationship with Amanda. Thoughts of my daughter were never far from my mind, though I hadn't heard from her since her visit to my apartment. The check she had left remained in a drawer uncashed. I wasn't ready to accept her financial assistance, not without addressing the deeper issues between us. After 3 weeks at Sunset Gardens, I had fallen into a comfortable routine. My apartment was gradually becoming a home with small touches that reflected my personality. A colleague had given me cuttings from her spider plant that now thrived on my windowsill. I had found an affordable print of Monet's water lilies at a thrift store to brighten my living room wall. The community's crafting group had presented me with a handmade quilt for my bed, a welcoming gift that moved me deeply. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. Clean, safe, and earned through my own efforts. On a Thursday evening, as I was preparing a simple dinner, there was a knock at my door. Opening it, I found Amanda and Gregory standing on my patio. Amanda looked nervous, Gregory uncomfortable. "Mum, I hope we're not interrupting," Amanda said. "We thought we'd stop by to see how you're settling in." I hesitated, surprised by Gregory's presence. He and I had never been close, and he had made little effort to connect with me over the years. "I was just making dinner. Would you like to come in?" They stepped into my small apartment, Gregory's eyes scanning the modest space with poorly concealed judgment. "Cozy," he commented, which I took to mean small and cheap. "It suits my needs," I replied, turning off the stove. "What brings you both here?" Amanda glanced at Gregory before answering. "We were concerned about you, Mum. Working at your age, living in such a basic situation. We wanted to see if you'd reconsidered our offer of help. I appreciate your concern, but as you can see, I'm doing fine. My apartment is clean and safe, and I find the work fulfilling." Gregory cleared his throat. "Mrs. Parker, I think what Amanda is trying to say is that this isn't necessary. We have the resources to provide you with a more comfortable lifestyle. There's no need for you to be working as a... What exactly is your job here?" His condescending tone made my spine stiffen. "I'm the assistant residential manager. I coordinate healthcare services, organize activities, and address residents' concerns. It's meaningful work that makes use of my nursing experience." "But at your age, you should be relaxing, enjoying retirement," Amanda interjected. "Not working a job that keeps you on your feet all day." "I find purpose in being useful, Amanda, in helping others. That's something I've always valued, something I thought I had taught you to value as well." A heavy silence fell over the room. Gregory shifted uncomfortably while Amanda looked increasingly distressed. Finally, she said, "We've reserved a table at Marcello's for dinner. Why don't you come with us? We can talk more about your situation." My situation. As if my chosen path was a problem to be solved rather than a decision to be respected. "I've already started my dinner," I replied. "But thank you for the invitation." "Mum, please." Amanda's voice took on a pleading quality. "I'm trying here. I want us to be close again." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The designer clothes, the expensive handbag, the carefully maintained appearance that spoke of privilege and comfort. She had changed so much from the girl who once understood the value of hard work and simple pleasures. But behind the polished exterior, I could still see glimpses of that girl, confused and hurt by the distance between us. "Amanda, I want that too. But rebuilding our relationship can't be about money or material comfort. It has to be about understanding and respect." "That's what I'm trying to show you," she insisted. "By offering help, by wanting to make your life easier. But you're not listening to what I actually want or need. You're assuming that your definition of a good life is universal. It's not." I took a deep breath, knowing it was time for complete honesty. When you bought Judith a house while knowing about my living conditions, it sent a clear message about who mattered in your life and who didn't. That hurt deeply, Amanda. And that hurt isn't fixed by now offering me financial assistance out of guilt or obligation. Gregory's face hardened. With all due respect, Mrs. Parker, that house was a joint decision. My mother had been talking about downsizing for years, and we were in a position to help her. And you weren't in a position to help me when my ceiling collapsed? I asked quietly. When I was injured and developing respiratory problems from the mold. When I called Amanda in tears because I had nowhere to go after the flood. Gregory looked genuinely surprised. I wasn't aware of the extent of your problems. Amanda mentioned some maintenance issues, but… Some maintenance issues, I repeated incredulously. I was living in dangerous conditions, Gregory. Conditions that sent me to the emergency room. Conditions that destroyed nearly everything I owned. He turned to Amanda. You said her apartment had a few leaks, nothing serious. Amanda's face flushed. I didn't want to worry you with her problems. We were focused on the house for your mother, and I thought Mum could manage until later. The revelation hung in the air. Amanda had deliberately minimized my situation to her husband. Whether out of shame, convenience, or fear of diverting resources from Judith's house, she had chosen to downplay my living conditions. I think it's best if you both leave now, I said quietly. I need time to process this. Mum, please, Amanda began, but Gregory placed a hand on her arm. I think your mother is right. We should go. He looked at me with new consideration in his eyes. Mrs. Parker, I apologize if I was unaware of your circumstances. It seems there's been a significant miscommunication. After they left, I sat at my small dining table, my appetite gone. The conversation had revealed something important. Gregory hadn't known the full truth. Amanda had been the one to decide that my needs were less important than Judith's, less worthy of immediate attention and resources. That knowledge didn't erase the hurt, but it did reframe my understanding of what had happened. It wasn't simply that I mattered less to both of them. It was that Amanda had made choices about what information to share and what to conceal, choices that had ultimately left me struggling alone while Judith received a luxury home. The next morning, Eleanor noticed my distraction. Rough night, Phyllis. Family issues, I admitted. My daughter and son-in-law stopped by. Ah, she nodded understandingly. Family visits can be complicated. Want to talk about it over lunch? During our break, I found myself sharing the whole story with Elena, from Amanda's purchase of Judith's house to last night's uncomfortable dinner invitation. Elena listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful. You know, she said when I finished working here, has taught me something important about family relationships. They're rarely what they appear on the surface. Often the parent-child dynamic becomes distorted over time with unspoken expectations and assumptions on both sides. What do you mean? I mean that sometimes our children make choices we don't understand because they're operating from a completely different perspective. Amanda may have minimized your situation to her husband, not out of malice, but out of a complex mix of guilt, shame, and conflict avoidance. I considered this. That doesn't make it right. No, it doesn't, Elena agreed. But understanding the why might help you decide how to move forward. Do you want to repair your relationship with your daughter? Of course I do, I replied without hesitation, but not at the cost of my self-respect. Then perhaps the next step is having an honest conversation with her alone. Not about money or housing, but about the patterns in your relationship that led to this point. Elena's advice stayed with me throughout the day. By evening, I had reached a decision. I called Amanda and asked her to meet me for coffee on Saturday afternoon, just the two of us. To my relief, she agreed immediately. The coffee shop was a small, quiet place near Sunset Gardens. I arrived early and chose a table in the corner, away from other customers. My hands trembled slightly as I sipped my tea, rehearsing in my mind what I wanted to say. Amanda arrived precisely on time, looking nervous but determined. She was dressed more casually than usual in jeans and a simple sweater, rather than her typical designer outfit. It reminded me of how she used to dress before meeting Gregory, and I found the change oddly touching. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, as she sat down across from me. "Of course, Mum. I've been hoping we could talk just us." She fidgeted with her coffee cup. "I need to tell you something. After our dinner the other night, Gregory and I had a long conversation. He was upset that I hadn't told him the full extent of your living situation. He said if he'd known, he would have insisted we help you first before his mother." I raised an eyebrow. Really, I find that hard to believe given how close he is with Judith. "That's the thing, Mum. Gregory and Judith don't actually have the perfect relationship everyone thinks they do. She's been manipulating and controlling him his entire life. The house was partly his idea because he feels constant guilt that he's never done enough for her." Amanda sighed deeply. "Which is exactly the pattern I've fallen into with him. Always trying to please, never feeling like it's enough." This was a side of their relationship I hadn't seen before. I had no idea. No one does. We present this perfect image to the world while navigating a minefield of expectations behind closed doors. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "But that's not an excuse for how I treated you. I minimized your problems because acknowledging them meant facing my own failure as a daughter. It was easier to pretend everything was fine than to admit I was letting you down while giving everything to Judith." Her honesty caught me by surprise. "I appreciate you saying that, Amanda, but I need to know why. What changed between us? We used to be so close." Amanda was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "When I met Gregory, I entered a world so different from how we lived. Suddenly there were country clubs and vacation homes and designer everything. At first I felt like an imposter, like everyone could tell I didn't belong. Judith especially had a way of making me feel inadequate with little comments about my background or education." "So you tried to prove yourself worthy," I guessed. She nodded. "Exactly. I threw myself into becoming what Judith and her friends would approve of. I changed how I dressed, how I spoke, what I valued. And somewhere along the way I started seeing our old life, our values through their eyes, as something to overcome rather than something to be proud of." "And that included me," I said softly. "Yes," Amanda admitted, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm so ashamed to say it, but yes. When Judith would make comments about how quaint it was that you worked as a nurse instead of focusing on raising me, or how brave you were to live in such a diverse neighborhood, I didn't defend you. I smiled and changed the subject. I let her shape my perception of my own mother, the woman who sacrificed everything for me." Her words hurt, but there was relief in finally hearing the truth. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Gregory's reaction after dinner at your place was a wake-up call. He was genuinely appalled when I admitted I'd downplayed your situation. He asked me what kind of person prioritizes impressing his mother over helping my own mother, who was living in dangerous conditions." Her voice broke. "And I didn't have an answer, Mum. I couldn't justify it, not even to myself." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Amanda, we've both made mistakes. I've spent so much time feeling hurt and betrayed that I haven't fully considered how my expectations might have influenced your choices. I never wanted you to feel like you had to choose between your new family and me." "But that's just it," she said. "I did choose repeatedly, and I chose wrong. Not because anyone forced me to, but because I lost sight of what truly matters." She squeezed my hand. "I've been seeing a therapist, Mum, since our confrontation about Judith's house. I'm trying to understand why I became so desperate for approval that I would hurt the one person who has always loved me unconditionally." "I'm glad you're getting help," I said sincerely. "That takes courage. Gregory's started coming with me to some sessions. We're both realizing how unhealthy our relationships with our parents have become, how we've been repeating patterns from our childhoods without even being aware of it." She took a deep breath. "Which brings me to something else I need to tell you. Gregory and I are considering separating." "Oh, Amanda," I said, genuinely concerned. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know yet. We're trying to figure out if we can build something healthier together, or if we've built our relationship on such a flawed foundation that it can't be salvaged. She gave a sad smile. But whatever happens, I want to rebuild my relationship with you, Mum. Not with gifts or money, but with honesty and respect. If you're willing to try. I considered her words carefully. The hurt hadn't magically disappeared, but there was an opening now, a chance for something new and potentially better. I would like that very much, I finally said. But it has to be different this time. I need to know that I matter in your life, that my feelings and well-being are important to you. They are, she insisted, and I'll prove it through actions, not just words. She hesitated, then added, I've told Judith that her comments about you are unacceptable, that if she wants to be part of our lives, she needs to show you the same respect she expects for herself. I could imagine how that conversation had gone. How did she take it? Amanda laughed without humor. Not well. She accused me of betraying family loyalty, said I was choosing you over them. When I pointed out that you are my family, she didn't have much to say to that. We talked for nearly 3 hours, moving from painful revelations to cautious plans for the future. We agreed to start with small steps, a weekly phone call, monthly dinners, and complete honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. As we prepared to leave, Amanda asked, Will you ever forgive me, Mum? For the house, for everything? I thought carefully before answering. I'm working on it. Forgiveness isn't something I can promise on a specific timeline, but I'm open to building something new together, something better than before. She nodded, accepting this answer as the honest offering it was. That's all I can ask for. As I walked back to Sunset Gardens, I felt lighter than I had in months. The conversation hadn't erased the past, but it had created a possibility for healing that I hadn't thought possible. Over the following months, Amanda kept her word. Our weekly calls became a touchstone for both of us. She visited regularly, sometimes bringing Gregory, sometimes coming alone. When she did bring him, I noticed a change in his demeanor, a new humility and awareness that suggested their therapy was having an effect. 6 months after our coffee shop conversation, Amanda called with surprising news. Mum, I've been offered a position with a non-profit that helps low-income seniors find affordable housing. I'd be using my real estate knowledge to advocate for people who need safe, dignified places to live. That sounds perfect for you, I said, genuinely pleased. What about your current job? I'm leaving the luxury market. It never really felt right selling multi-million-dollar properties while so many people struggle to find basic housing. There was a new conviction in her voice. My experience with your apartment situation made me realize how broken the system is. I want to be part of fixing it, not profiting from it. As our relationship slowly healed, I found myself thriving at Sunset Gardens. Elena promoted me to head of resident services after the previous manager retired. The position came with a modest salary increase and greater responsibility, which I embraced enthusiastically. My small apartment had become a true home, filled with new memories and simple treasures. The residents had become like family, each with their own stories and wisdom to share. Mr. Hoffman continued our morning coffee ritual, now joined by several others who enjoyed our discussions about politics, literature, and life. 1 year after the flood that had seemingly destroyed my life, I looked around at what I had built from those ruins. I had financial security, meaningful work, a community that valued me, and a healing relationship with my daughter. I had lost material possessions, but gained something far more valuable: self-respect and independence. Amanda continued her own journey of growth, both professionally and personally. She and Gregory ultimately decided to stay together, but radically changed how they interacted with both of their mothers. They established clear boundaries with Judith, refusing to be manipulated by guilt or obligation. And with me, Amanda developed a relationship based on mutual respect rather than duty or pity. As for Judith, she eventually sold the house Amanda and Gregory had purchased for her, claiming it was too modest for her needs. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. She purchased a condominium in Florida, putting literal distance between herself and the family dynamics she had dominated for so long. The greatest change, however, was within me. At 68 years old, I had discovered a new chapter in life, one I had never anticipated, but now embraced wholeheartedly. I had learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand the respect you deserve, and to build a life that reflects your true values. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love, both for yourself and for others, is to say enough and walk away from situations that diminish your worth. It wasn't about revenge or punishment, but about having the courage to create healthy boundaries and the wisdom to know when to hold firm and when to forgive. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between what others expected of you and what you knew was right for your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. How did you find the strength to choose yourself? What happened as a result? Please like and subscribe if my story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that it's never too late to start over. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you treat yourself.